Welcome to the Children in Scotland podcast. This episode focuses on the work of the CHANGE Childcare project. So let's meet the team and find out more.
Hello and welcome to everybody listening to today's podcast. My name is Robert Doyle and I'm here with Sally Cavers and Alison Hay, and today we're going to have a chat to you about the CHANGE project. CHANGE is an acronym that stands for Childcare and Nurture Glasgow East. And CHANGE is a project working with communities in Glasgow East to develop childcare services in the area. We want to grow childcare services that best support children and families, and we hope this growth will result in additional childcare places being taken up by children aged 0 to 12. The project began in October 2016 and it covers a sizable chunk of the East End, including Calton, Bridgeton, Parkhead, Dalmarnock, Tollcross and West Shettleston. CHANGE is funded by the National Lottery Community Fund and our staff are based in the project area at Parkhead Schoolhouse with Parkhead Housing Association and at the Olympia Building in Bridgeton with Glasgow Centre for Population Health. CHANGE is very much based on relationships and meaningful community engagement and partnership working. The project includes a group of people with a variety of roles in the area. This group is called the CHANGE Hub and they work together to respond to issues in the community through innovation and the development and testing of new ideas. We'll chat a wee bit more about the CHANGE Hub in depth soon. But right now I think a good place for us to start would be for us to introduce ourselves and say a little bit about our roles in the team. Sally, would you like to start us off?
Thanks, Robert. My name is Sally Cavers and I am currently Head of Inclusion at Children in Scotland. Children in Scotland is the organisation that manages the CHANGE project. I have been lucky enough to be involved and leading the CHANGE work from the start, so from 2016. The other work that I'm involved in at Children in Scotland generally concerns our additional support for learning projects and services and additional support needs work. I'm very interested in childcare because of an interest, and one of the work streams at Children in Scotland is around about challenging inequality. So childcare is really an area where I'd really like to see some change in access to childcare and making sure that we're involved in improvements in the area. So that's me.
Thanks, Sally. And Alison?
Hi Robert, I'm Alison Hay. I'm the Senior Policy and Participation Officer with the CHANGE project. I grew up in Glasgow East and I've worked there previously. In actual fact, my first job was in Parkhead Centre. So it's been really nice to be back in the area. And at the moment, I'm kind of working on the community engagement part of the project and also have responsibility for the CHANGE Hub, which I know we're going to speak about later on in a wee bit more depth.
Thanks, Alison. And my name's Robert. I'm a project officer on the CHANGE project, and I also grew up and have lived and worked in the East End most of my life. I've been lucky enough to have loads of really interesting and rewarding roles in the third sector, and a few of these have been in the area, so that's given me a good background knowledge for my current role. I joined the team fairly recently, at the beginning of this year, but I've been familiar with the project from early on as I was a community worker in the area when the project was just starting out. So now that I work at CHANGE, my role is mainly around the communications of the project, sharing the learning that's been gathered over the course of the last 4 years, as well as gathering more data and information as the project nears its completion. I also support Alison in terms of the community engagement and partnership work that she mentioned. So it's a really rewarding role and I really enjoy it. Alison, would you like to start us off by giving a little bit of an insight into what CHANGE is currently working on?
The hub that we've got running, it aims to deliver really positive change on the barriers that have been identified by families in the area. And that's kind of looking at what systems are in the area and kind of what's not working for families that well. And so really, when we were doing the community engagement part of the project, when we spoke to families and we spoke to services, they highlighted particular things that they were finding a bit difficult in the area, and that was things around low-cost quality foods, finding information about where they could access that. They also spoke about trying to get kind of emergency childcare as well, because we know that the childcare expansion is going on at the moment. And so therefore maybe additionality that was there before if you had an emergency appointment is not there at the moment. And Also, there was a lack of out-school care in Parkhead and also the lack of childminders in the area. So the hub has been involved in different levels with all of these to kind of support a bit of change around that. But when we first started out, we were just really looking for services who really were childcare services. But as we were going around doing the community engagement phase, we were finding out that other services in the area that work with families, including like DWP, health improvement, and various other services in the area were saying, well, we don't actually work in childcare, but we support the same families, so we would like to be involved. So now our Change Hub has grown and grown, and it really has given a bit of a voice to the work that we're doing as well in the community. And we're doing some tests of change around some of the aspects that I've spoken about, and we'll discuss them in more detail later on.
Thanks, Alison. That's a great overview of the development work that's been established with local community partners. Sally, could you take us back just a few wee steps and tell us a little bit about the origins of the Change project? How did Change come about, and why was this area chosen?
Sure. So Children in Scotland had been involved in looking at childcare for a number of years, and looking at, in particular, at some of the barriers to providing childcare and to accessing it. We were involved in the Commission for Childcare Reform, which reported 5 years ago. It reported in 2015. And it made a number of recommendations about where real transformation was required in order to improve the childcare offer in Scotland. There were recommendations about, in particular, about where some families had difficulties in accessing what was available, and particularly in areas where there's some particular challenges and there are a low number of registered childcare places. And the Change area was certainly one of these. We'd done some work, Children Scotland had done some work previously with Glasgow City Council and also with the Glasgow Centre for Population Health, and were supported by both Glasgow City Council and the Glasgow Centre for Population Health in putting together an application. And originally that application to the National Lottery Community Fund was about growing the number of registered childcare places, and we'll talk a little bit about how that's evolved over time. But we were looking at how do you grow places where there are challenges in providing services, and where families have already identified a whole host of reasons about barriers to accessing childcare. So we knew that it was quite a challenging task, but we also knew that we wanted to be part of something that would explore and unpick some really entrenched and embedded issues. So the application was made, and we were really delighted to receive notification of our success in 2016. We also had good connections with the International Futures Forum, and we engaged the forum from the outset in supporting some of our thinking about how we were going to secure change in the longer term. So it was no surprise really that change is the acronym that was found for this particular work that we came up with. And as Robert says, stands for Childcare and Nurture Glasgow East. And that nurture word was really critical to us. It was really important that we involved that in the focus of the work, because we wanted to look at connections to family support and where childcare fits into the broader offer for children and families. We talked a lot about sustainability in the application, and we knew we had quite a lot of contact with services who had spoken to us about the difficulty they have in being sustainable in areas where the demand for places is not the same. We also wanted to connect this work to improving outcomes for children and families, and we wanted the research questions to really interrogate some of the particular challenges about childcare, but also, like I say, making that connection to the broader offer of services for children and families and what was happening around about family support. As Robert and Alison have indicated, so it was really important to us that having staff based in the project area was key. And from the outset, we had one member of staff, and then we grew the team slightly. So we had one member of staff based in the Barrafield Community Centre. And then, as you've heard, we have now got office space in the Parkhead Housing Association Schoolhouse building and in the Olympia building. And that's really been absolutely core, to be able to start the work, to be familiar faces to members of the community, and to really have insight into what the experience is for children and families locally, and what the experience is for services. So I think 4 years has gone by very quickly, but certainly from the original submission of that application, I think we feel now even more determined than ever to continue to seek change for families in our project area, but also for other families nationally who are experiencing the same challenges around about childcare.
Sally, just in terms of that implementation process on the ground, was there any key learning points or any particular things that led to the project being successfully implemented? I
think the key learning for me was Alison's and Robbie have both mentioned relationships, and I think it's investing as much time as you can in establishing and developing relationships locally. I certainly remember some quite challenging, uncomfortable conversations in the early days about Children in Scotland's motivation and to be involved in this very local piece of work. And also the fact that many families had been consulted, asked, childcare reform had been on the agenda for a long time. There's quite a bit of fatigue around about being consulted and then not seeing any results. So we didn't want to be part of that. We didn't want to be another organisation that was seen to kind of fly in and out of an area. So we needed to really make the most of the whole host of really amazing high quality services that work locally, and we really needed to be from the outset speaking to families, listening and making sure that we were demonstrating that we were acting on what we were hearing. So I think in the initial stages that was the approach that we adopted, and one that we've certainly tried to stick to throughout our work in the east of Glasgow.
And on the theme of relationships, the Change Hub has been instrumental to our development work and creating those connections in the community. Alison, can you tell us a bit more about how the Change Hub has evolved?
Yeah, sure, Robert. I think those relationships were really key. I think having that trust in the area has been really, really important, and it has allowed us to have that real multi-agency approach. People coming from very different backgrounds. I think it's quite a unique network of people, because quite often people do engage within their own sectors. So I think to have that kind of cross-sector working has really been important. I suppose right at the beginning for us, what we thought was, well, how do we evidence that we're making a difference around the whole community engagement process with families? And we really spoke for quite a long time about how we would gather that evidence and how we could really demonstrate impact. And really at the time, what we decided was to use the Children and Young People's Improvement methodology to kind of capture that, because quite a lot of the services were already using that when they were having their care inspectorate visits and things. So we thought that was maybe the best way, because we weren't reinventing the wheel, and it was easier for people. And we were also finding other services, including health and DWP, were also using that methodology. So we have used that to evidence our work. We have what's called driver diagrams, which actually just track the journey of where we want particular aspects of work to go. We're very lucky in the fact that we have a Scottish Government Improvement Advisor who meets with the hub regularly, just to make sure that we are making a difference, we are demonstrating impact and checking our measurements as well. And we were really pleased, because the hub's only been operating since March 2018. So we were really pleased when we got nominated for the Most Inspiring Innovative Project last year. And I think that was really down to the fantastic work of the Change Hub members and how much work that they had done over that period of time. So really, we're using the improvement methodology really to demonstrate a systems change. And again, as I mentioned before, we have particular aspects of work that we're currently working on, and we do what's called tests of change, and that's really just small tests that we do to see how much difference they're making in the community. So around the emergency childcare aspect that I spoke about earlier on, we have done quite a lot of scoping with families and with services in the area around that. And we have completed a scoping report, which has been submitted to various places based on where the Change Hub members feel it will have most influence. And then we have also looked at access to low cost quality foods. And we've done that in a couple of ways. We've done that, as I mentioned before, working with Alice. We have created a directory, but that directory now is ready to kind of go online, which kind of tells you about the resources in the area around food. And it also tells you things like, where there's growing project, where there's nutritionists, and it just maybe makes that information a bit more accessible for families and for services as well. But also out of that piece of work, we discovered that we had nutritionists that were working locally, and we also had a local community garden, and we kind of have tested putting those two together. And it's worked really well, and it's became the Plot to Plate Club, who are at the moment working with various schools and nurseries in the area as well. And it's really a whole family approach where families help to develop the club, and then they get support from nutritionists and community growers to deliver that. And also we've had a bit of an input into the out of school care in Parkhead, but really that's been an advisory capacity, as with the childminding as well. So there's been a lot going on, but obviously we know that the Change project is due to finish in December. So at the moment, the Change Hub is really focused on where it wants to go in the future and looking at planning for beyond the life of Change, really, just to see how they can keep it going, what capacity, and I suppose where it will sit in the future. But I think what it's really shown me during the whole COVID period as well is just really the strength of those members, because they've carried on coming together. And although, maybe for a period of time it was getting used really to network and find out what each other are doing, we're now back to the priorities that we've identified within those drivers. So, we've moved back to getting on with it, getting on with the work, but also thinking about, how do we keep it going in the future?
I think one of the strengths of the Change Hub as well is the range of partners, the variety of different backgrounds. Would you agree with that, Alison?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think even the magic of the hub has not just been what we are delivering as a hub. It's been those connections between members that just actually have happened quite organically. And that has been really nice to see partnerships forming, them identifying pieces of work that they're doing in their own services that they could work in collaboration on. So I think that cross-sector working really has added something to it, because somebody could be running a certain club and think, I could join into that, or we could do it together. And so there's been pieces of work that have developed over time that actually have nothing to do with the Change Hub, apart from giving them the opportunity to network out with their own sectors. So there has been a real magic there, I think. And again, I think that's just down to what I find with the Change Hub members is they're really passionate about trying to drive forward change. And a lot of the people that sit in the Change Hub were mentioned to us time and time again by families to say, they've really helped me, they've really supported me. And, and so for us to get that input from them that are working on the grounds has been really valuable in helping us to take forward the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, it's really important. Sally, how would you describe the Change project approach as a kind of overview?
It's been quite difficult, really, to describe the Change project approach, and it's something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about and considering. And I think we are now at this point in delivering the work, a point where we think we are really able to summarise it, and that's because the complexity of the work, but also it's certainly been a journey where we have quite often needed to adjust and do things a bit differently as a result of external factors, things that are happening at the moment, or as a result of the things that people were telling us. So we talk about the change secret ingredients a fair bit, and these are the things that make what we're trying to do hopefully unique, but then also we want to create something that can be shared and can spread. So I think it's really important to say, I mentioned this earlier, but listening and responding to what we're hearing from the people who are accessing services or that services are intended to benefit, so from children and families, is absolutely key. And I think making sure that we are seen to be respectful and considerate in our interaction and response is essential. We've got enough capacity within the team to invest time in listening and responding, and that for me is really critical, especially when there's a number of people in the community who feel, as I was saying earlier, who feel that they are asked about things and maybe don't see a result or a response that's really going to meet needs. So we wanted to make sure we were doing that, but we were also really determined not to emphasise some of the way that the area is described and some of the outcomes for children and families that are really picked up on. So the area is quite often described as one of the most deprived in Scotland. The outcomes for children and families in comparison to other areas can be described as poor. But when we started working in the east of Glasgow, what we were finding was, in terms of people working and supporting and doing everything that they possibly could for children and families, it was overwhelming. And we also knew that people were just feeling that the description about the community wasn't helping the community to move forward. And in terms of childcare, that there was so much happening in terms of providing support for families that was really, really phenomenal. And some of the individuals providing that support, Alison's talked about some of the Change Hub members. We really wanted to make sure that we were shining a light on some of the things happening and that families were reporting was absolutely what they need and would help them to thrive. So that I think is a core part of the approach. And we've been really fortunate in terms of the people who've supported our work and the people who've helped to take some of the aims and aspirations of the Change project forward. So people who've given their time to talk to us in the community, and those people in services, so leads, managers, coordinators, who have got on boards, who've shared frustration, who have shared commitment, who have a real passion to make a difference. We have been really lucky to work alongside some really great people. I referred earlier to some of the challenging conversations when we got started. It was a new piece of work, and we were hosted by a national organisation. But I do think that the perspective that, just having a bit of a distance from organisations working locally, or having the time that this grant has awarded us has been really beneficial. So I think that perspective is important. And the other thing I want to say about the change approach is that we were hearing early on about some things going round and round and not making a real change or difference. And we didn't want to be part of that. We wanted to look for solutions. We wanted to come up with things that would make the most difference to children and families, and to the services trying to support children and families. And I think some of those were not new things previously identified by many other people, but some of them were quite straightforward, small things that could make a big difference. Other things much more complex, and we won't know when this piece of work finishes at the end of this year. We hope that we will have put in place some of the foundations for work that we have started or progressed, but a lot of it is much more longer term in order to make a difference. And obviously as the impact of COVID-19 really is better known, and as the months progress, it's a different landscape certainly to the one that we first encountered in the area 4 years ago.
Yeah, Sally, I mean, I agree with what you're saying there, and I think I've had quite a unique position, having experienced the project and its approach from different perspectives. So I've seen the change work in the as a community member, but also working alongside the team as a partner, and now I'm part of that team. And I think one of the most important things that Change has done is put the community and local services and partners first in its approach. I mean, right from the outset, staff haven't just went in and said, we know what this area needs and designed a project around that. Rather, it's been a more gradual approach that puts listening and relationships first. And I think that's really important. You can't underestimate that, because people who have been living here for years and working here for years, they're the experts. And they don't need anybody else to tell them what the issues are and how to fix them. And I think that can be a really patronising approach anyway and turn people off. So I think through chatting to people in the Force Shopping Centre or meeting families, local parents at toddlers groups, and bringing people together in one room and creating a safe space to share and explore local experiences at the Change Hub, I think those are the things that have allowed the project to learn together with community stakeholders and identify what's already working well, that can be supported, and what's needed to improve things locally, what's missing, what can we develop. So in terms of childcare and related issues, it's very much about amplifying local organisations and services' voices, amplifying local families' voices, and of course amplifying local children's voices. Alison, have you got anything you'd like to say just on the change approach?
I think, Robert, just really I just really like to kind of echo what you've both just said. I mean, I think that is really the heart of the project, is that we spent so long and we were so lucky to get such an intense period of community engagement right at the very beginning, because it did let us capture what people in the community were saying, what they really felt. And it does take a bit of time as well to get trust up, because, if there has been a lot of services going in the past and there maybe hasn't been things delivered on, or they haven't seen them being delivered on, I think, that obviously it takes a bit of time to kind of build those relationships up again. And I think as well that we've been very lucky because of kind of living in the area, working in the area previously, we had a lot of connections there already. And if families didn't know us, then they knew the services. So the services would say, oh, these people are okay to trust. And, because sometimes it's very difficult to have to keep telling your story again as well. And I think, we all feel really kind of privileged, to have had those stories and also feel that we want to deliver on, what we've said that we would. So, or do our very best too. So yeah, I think having that approach and having that time, because there's not really many projects that get that amount of time right at the beginning to invest so much community engagement. And I think that has really helped us to honestly know what's going on in the area and kind of what families feel will make a difference.
Yeah, it's given the project strong foundations, hasn't it? And I think if I was starting a project up somewhere else, those key learning points about spending the time you need to spend to build those honest, trusting relationships, and that whole thing about being adaptive, taking what's said and using it to inform how the project develops. It's really, really simple, but I think people have just responded to it really well. And, that approach has seen the project's aims and objectives evolve. As the relationships have developed and became stronger locally, so did the understanding of the local picture and the wants and the needs for families and children and people who work in the area. And that led to that focus shifting from childcare place numbers, as Sally mentioned, to a more holistic family wellbeing approach. I think one of our partners said, we don't want to create more childcare that people won't use. So it became more about getting people ready for childcare and more about family support. Sally, how important has evaluation been for the Change project?
Evaluation has been really important from the outset. As I've mentioned, we had really strong input from the Glasgow Centre for Population Health in the project application and informing what the outline evaluation framework would look like. And I feel we have certainly really benefited from both the rigour and the credibility of the input from the Glasgow Centre for Population Health. So at the start of the work, the Glasgow Centre for Population Health spent a considerable amount of time working on the compilation of the baseline data. And I think it revealed really important things for how the work that the project took forward. So, for example, the number of registered places in out of school care. So we knew it was low, but in a really thorough gathering of baseline data, we found that there were, of the 5 providers of out of school care in the project area, there were 163 registered places, and for almost 5,000 children between 4 and 14, that meant there was 1 place for every 29 children, which is certainly a lot lower than in some areas, both in the city and nationally. It also revealed the waiting list for what we knew were very popular Glasgow City Council early learning and childcare places. So for some provision, for some services, it revealed quite a significant waiting list. So that rigour and the Glasgow Centre for Population Health approach was really important to give credibility to the work from the outset. And I think we also really benefited from the recommendation by the researchers in the team that we include a process evaluation. And most of the work around the process evaluation was done during the second year of the project work, and it was done relatively swiftly. And I think at halfway point, it revealed some really important things about how the project was working, delivering, developing, and certainly revealed a bit of an inconsistency about an inconsistency in what some of the key people involved in the project felt was the direction and really the key focus and aim of the work. So we made sure that we got together to unpick and explore some of that, but it also revealed where there were gaps in terms of input and critical friends for the work, and we expanded the membership of the project board as a result of that. So although at the time, I think when we were keen to kind of proceed and go ahead with project work, I would certainly recommend process evaluation at that sort of halfway or just before halfway point in work, because it gave us an opportunity to make improvements at that point rather than reflecting on the end where things hadn't worked as well as they could have done. I think in terms of evaluation as well, what the evaluation across years 1 to 3 revealed was certainly the strength in the project staff. Now, I always knew that we were very fortunate for the staff that we'd managed to find to join the project, but the evaluation also revealed that strength and the importance of having staff based in the community. And it also revealed really important features of the Change Hub. And the Change Hub had been something that we had been struggling to maybe articulate and to explain its value, but that's what the evaluation and certainly the year 3 evaluation picked up on and reported on. So that was really core and is going to be key to the overall learning of the work. And the other thing I think in terms of evaluation and which was really important was it gave us the opportunity to consider engagement with the community, the approach that was being taken, and how we fed back to the community about the work and about what we were finding. And it meant that we, with the evaluation team, were underpinning how the project staff made sure that happened. We'd spoken about how to make sure that we were regularly getting back to community to members from the outset, but that the evaluation approach and the input from the team was a constant reminder of the importance to do that. So I think overall we have really benefited from a very thorough and in-depth evaluation, and we were very fortunate to have the Glasgow Centre for Population Health involved in leading that.
I think that's an aspect of the Change project that is really important, that I was impressed by as a partner at the beginning. Was how the information that was collected was presented back to the community and to partners. I think it's really important when you ask local people and partners to give their time, that's respected, and that you go back to people and say, here's what you told us, here's how that's helped, and here's how we're going to use it to inform what happens next. So often people feed into things and maybe never hear about it again. So I think it's really important to follow things up and present those findings back to the community, because it's appreciated and it's the least people deserve when they're giving you their time and their thoughts.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in terms of to gain respect and to earn that respect, if you're doing any work in and with a community, you have to make sure that that's embedded. Otherwise, that point about credibility, I think, is you don't have the trust of the community members. And this work is about trying to make things better for children and their families, and for the services that are supporting them. So it has to be core. That feeding back has to be absolutely core.
Thanks, Sally. This has been a really great opportunity for us to share a bit about the Change project. We hope you found it interesting. We'd encourage anybody that wants to find out more or give us some feedback to get in touch. All of our contact details can be found on the Change website, change-childcare.org. We also do regular news bulletins which you can sign up to on the website too. And if you don't already follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. The Twitter handle is @ChangeChildcare, and our Facebook page is facebook.com/Change Childcare. Thanks for tuning in, and you never know, we might do another podcast soon, as there's plenty more to talk about. Thanks for your company. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Children in Scotland podcast. To find out more about all of our project work, including the Change project, head to our website at www.childreninscotland.org.uk.